Councilman Hypes, Councilman Will, and Councilman Binder, who has been held up, but he will be here shortly. And since Councilman Binder had an appointment he wanted to make, on behalf of Councilman Binder, I'd like to move to nominate Dana Davis as an alternate to the Natural Resources Commission. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the appointment as Dana Davis as an alternate to the Natural Resources Commission, please vote yes. Otherwise, vote accordingly. And it does pass unanimously. Congratulations. Also call for the nomination for the Development Authority appointment.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to put forth the name of D.C. Aiken, who lives in the Parkbrook subdivision off Kimball Ridge Road, former city councilman and former Development Authority member from way back when, before he joined the city council. Been a great public servant to the city, and is willing to join the Development Authority, probably at a very critical period of history for Alpharetta, because we have a lot coming down the pike with respect to what will go before that board. So I'd like to appoint D.C. Aiken to the Development Authority.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of the appointment of D.C. Aiken to the Development Authority, please vote yes. Otherwise, vote accordingly. And it does pass unanimously. And now that you have been appointed, if the two of you would come forward so we can actually do a little swearing-in ceremony and make it official. Sir? Oh, we have a third. I forgot you were going to be sworn in this evening as well. Okay, so we do this all at once to make it a little easier and you have something to read from. So much like in a wedding ceremony, I'll just read the lines and then you read the lines, and where it says fill in your name, or fill in the position that you'll be filling, okay? It can be confusing sometimes, but it's generally faster this way. So this is the oath of office for the state. For I state your name. Hereby accept the honor of serving as a board member of the state, your board. Excellent. Of the city of Alpharetta, Georgia. I do solemnly swear or affirm that. I am not the holder of any unaccounted for public money due to the state or any political subdivision or authority thereof.
I am not the holder of any unaccounted for public money due to the state or any political subdivision or authority thereof.
And just so you know, we didn't add that. That was a state requirement, so they just want to make sure. I am qualified to hold said office according to the Constitution and laws of Georgia.
I am qualified to hold said office according to the Constitution and laws of Georgia.
I shall support the Constitution and laws of the state of Georgia and the Constitution and laws of the United States of America.
I shall support the Constitution and laws of the state of Georgia and the Constitution and laws of the United States of America.
Further, I do solemnly swear or affirm that I shall faithfully perform the duties of a state your board,
faithfully perform the duties of a natural resource commissioner,
regularly attend meetings, uphold the ideals of community and service, act and conduct business in accordance with the city's code of ethics and conduct, support the charter and laws of the city of Alpharetta, Georgia.
support the charter and laws of the city of Alpharetta,
So sworn the 6th day of March, 2023.
so sworn the 6th day of March, 2023.
Congratulations. Thank you very much for your service to our community. Here, you can use the desk. It's not as hard if you use the desk.
No, it's not, but I didn't want to overstep.
Thank you. Must be a doctor as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Now it is my great honor to stand up here and give recognition to someone who does not want recognition, has never accepted recognition, and I knew she would not like us doing that this evening. However, she is a tremendous woman, a good friend, and a tremendous value to our entire City of Alpharetta community and has been for decades. And I'm speaking of Miss Janet Rogers, who is being recognized and congratulated for recognition that she received elsewhere for her service to our community and on behalf of the Convention and Visitors Bureau and hospitality industry in the state. So if Ms. Rogers and perhaps her staff would like to join us, maybe her husband, but I'll leave that up to him.
Yeah, you know the answer to that one.
Do it without them.
You could not.
Team, my team.
So this is Janet Rogers, the president and CEO of the Alpharetta Convention and Visitors Bureau. She was recently honored as a recipient for the Tom Kilgore Lifetime Achievement Award at the Georgia Convention and Visitors Bureau State Tourism Conference. Janet has served as the president and CEO of the Alpharetta Convention and Visitors Bureau for over 20 years. Mayor Pro Tem,
Sir.
I forgot to invite you up. He is on the Convention and Visitors Bureau board. Ms. Cook, as well. Mr. Lagerblum, my apologies. See, if it's not written down, I forget to do it. Janet has served as the president and CEO of the Alpharetta Convention and Visitors Bureau for over 20 years. Prior to her time at the ACVB, Rogers worked for the city of Alpharetta as the special events director, where she created and produced many special events, including the beloved Taste of Alpharetta. She has also served as the VP of Marketing and Sales at the DeKalb Convention and Visitors Bureau. Additionally, she was the Director of Marketing and Sales at various resort and corporate hotels. All of this experience spans nearly 35 years in the industry. She's known for building strong partnerships, cooperative marketing efforts, and skillfully executes a variety of programs that bring greater attention to the Alpharetta community, the state of Georgia, and the region. We would like to take this time to recognize Janet for all of her work in our community and thank her for everything she has accomplished for our city. And since I will never have another opportunity to give her the credit she is due, I'll fill in a little bit of that, and I'm sure some others could as well. So if you've seen those signs going on Georgia 400 that says the Hospitality Highway, that was Janet. Just about every event that you see in the city of Alpharetta that brings people together and celebrates our community, that is Janet and her team. And she really is the backbone to a lot of the things that makes Alpharetta special and has been for a very long time. And I say that seriously because Janet has never told anybody no. All they have to do is ask for anything. And by golly, she's going to figure out a way to help them achieve whatever they're trying to achieve, whether it's a restaurateur in the middle of a pandemic or whether it's hotels. And she really is a especially unique person who loves to serve and embodies that mantra. And it's exciting to be able to work with her. And just the other day, I had somebody start up a startup company in Alpharetta trying to bring in people for a conference. He said, do you know how I can? I said, call Janet. I don't know, but Janet knows everything in the city. She knows all the resources. She knows the spaces. Just call Janet. And that's what you, so if you ever need anything, just call Janet.
They do.
So is there anything anyone else would like to add at this point? We are very proud of her. And we didn't give her this award, but she earned it here. So I'm going to show it to everyone so we can get a photo op with Janet against her wishes. Squeeze in like we like each other.
Yeah.
Can someone
Get up
else
here.
take the photo?
Yeah, we've done this.
Yeah, we need Abby.
James will take it.
Here.
All right, come on out.
Get up there. Redskin shots, we'll share it.
So the next item on our agenda is the consent agenda. And the consent agenda consists of the council meeting minutes from the meeting of February 27th, 2023, and the alcoholic beverage license applications, which include PH-23-AB-03, Sulik Coffee and Wine Bar, LLC, 4150 Old Milton Parkway, Suite 120, Alpharetta, Georgia, 30005. Is there anyone that would like to remove anything from the consent agenda? Do I have a motion from council?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay. Oh, my apologies. I forgot to give an opportunity for public comment. Ms. Shapiro, do we have any public comment cards on the consent agenda?
No, sir, we do not.
However, if anyone would like to come forward and speak on the consent agenda, now's your chance. Seeing none, we'll close public comment. We had a motion by Councilman Mitchell, I believe it was, second by Mayor Pro Tem Merkel, to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor, please vote yes, or otherwise vote no. And it does pass unanimously. So that'll wrap up the consent agenda, and we'll move on to the public hearing portion of tonight's meeting. The first item is V-23-06, 130 John Christopher Drive. Director Cook, I believe you have a comment.
Yeah, I want to see if this is going to show up. Oh, yep. There we go. Good evening, Mayor and Council. The item that's shown to you on the screen, the applicants are requesting consideration of a variance to reduce the side setback from 10 feet to 3 feet in order to allow for the construction of a master bedroom addition. And this is located in the Cold Ridge Forest subdivision. Applicant's proposing a 350 to 375 square foot extension of the existing master bedroom in order to incorporate an en-suite bathroom and closet space. And I have a picture I'll just put up of the property that we're looking at. It's this home here. The 0.4 acre property is zoned R15 and developed with a one-story building. It's 1,584 square feet. There's a 6-foot privacy fence that surrounds the backyard. You can see a piece of that here in this photo. The UDC district regulations state that an R15 zoning must have a side yard setback of 10 feet. But when this one was built in 1974, it had a 5-foot encroachment into that 10-foot side setback. So any expansion or addition, they would have to come and get a variance. Although it's non-conforming now, you can't add to a non-conforming use. And I'll show you what that looks like on their site plan. It's a little bit hard to see, but the master bedroom is right now located in the structure with the dark lines. The addition, the 350-foot to 370-foot, is outlined here, so that would cause an additional encroachment into the side setback. They do, of course, have the 6-foot privacy fence, and they have submitted a letter from their neighbor that they're in support of the request for the variance. One of the items of concern that we had heard from one resident at the Citizen Zoning Information Meeting is they were concerned that a variance would allow larger homes to be built and variances to be given to larger homes. That was one of our considerations when we looked at this, because the addition is to a non-conforming setback that already exists, and the home, even with the addition, is still very similar to surrounding homes. So our recommendation is to approve V 2306-130 John Christopher Drive setback variance with 2 conditions of zoning. 1, master bedroom addition extension shall be permitted as depicted on the site plan, labeled Exhibit A, and with a 3-foot side setback along the north property line. And 2, a 6-foot privacy fence shall be maintained around the rear yard of the property as depicted on the site plan labeled Exhibit A. And again, that's because it's an addition to an existing home with an existing encroachment into the side setback. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to try to answer those.
Any questions for Director Cook? I do have one question. Going back to your statement about perhaps a larger building being made, is there anything in the zoning or the conditions that would prevent someone from eventually tearing down this structure and using that variance to still get closer to the property line?
No, this would be for this specific site plan. So if you did have a request for a tear down, they would have to meet the 10-foot side setback.
Thank you very much. If there's no other questions from council, thank you, Director. Would the applicant like to come forward?
Hi, my name is Jillian Van Blair, and our address is 130 John Christopher Drive, and we're just really excited to hopefully be able to extend our master bedroom.
Get more space.
Yeah.
Do we have any questions for the applicant? Thank you very much. Ms. Shapiro, do we have any public comment cards on this item?
We do not, Mr. Mayor.
However, if anyone would like to come forward and speak on this matter, now's your chance to do so. Seeing no one, we'll close public comment. Do I have a motion from council?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, I'd offer a motion tonight to approve V-23-06130 John Christopher Drive as presented tonight by Ms. Cook.
Second?
I have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Merkel and a second by Councilman Dorito, and that was to approve public hearing item V-23-06-130 John Christopher Drive as outlined in the conditions by Mayor Pro Tem Merkel. Any discussion? Thank you for investing in our community and becoming a part of Alpharetta. All those in favor, please vote yes, otherwise vote accordingly. And it does pass unanimously. And I believe I neglected for the public record to note that Councilman Binder has joined us. So I wanted to make sure and make it publicly known, although most of you probably saw him come up and sit down. So the next item on the public hearing is PH-23-02 Unified Development Code Text Amendments, Procedures to Establish a Residential Infill Overlay District. Ms. Tracy, if you would, please read the ordinance aloud.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is second reading of an ordinance by the Mayor and Council of the City of Alpharetta, Georgia, to amend Article 2 of the Unified Development Code of the City of Alpharetta, Georgia, to add regulations pertaining to procedures to establish a residential infill overlay district, to repeal conflicting ordinances, and for other purposes.
Director Cook, would you like to come forward and give staff's report?
Thank you, Mayor. There was a few questions that came up at the first reading. And just a reminder, this is just in order to recognize particular needs of a subdivision that does not have an HOA. We had, proposed overlay criteria in order to get the ball rolling, basically, for the city to be able to consider those. And so I had some questions from council at the last presentation. And the question that I had was who could sign for the 30%. Just as a reminder, in B, it talks about that in order for the process to get started, you would have to have 30% of the property owners residing within the proposed residential overlay district in order for staff to start researching. Also, within the overlay procedures, when you look at D, when it goes to D, it says all applications and petitions for a residential infill overlay district shall become final upon presentation and approval at a public hearing before the Planning Commission and the City Council, at which time the petition will include a minimum of 75% of the property owners having voted in favor of the imposition of the residential infill overlay district designation. So it takes 30% to get the ball rolling, and that has to be residents that actually reside on the property, and then it's 75% prior to adoption. Of course, during that time, we will have meetings if we receive the 30% to meet with residents to see what it is, and give guidance, technical guidance to make sure that we prepare a good recommendation. But it does say 75% for the final adoption. And then, of course, as with the public hearing that's required, that's still, it's not a given, even with 75%. There's a public hearing in order for everybody to provide input. But I would be glad to answer any other questions you may have about it, about the proposal.
Do we have any questions? Councilman Dorito, then Councilman Mitchell.
Thank you, Ms. Cook. The term residing, can you define that?
They actually have to, that has to be their home where they are living at that home. It can't be a rental property and they live elsewhere. So for the 30%, you would have to be residing on that property.
So if someone purchases a property in this proposed overlay district, but they're not residing in the house, but they're looking to rebuild it, renovate it, and then basically flip it and resell it, are they considered residing if they own the property?
If they're not renting out the property to somebody else, if they were living there and they actively had to leave while it's under construction, that's something we would certainly consider.
Okay.
And then again, once you start with a 30%, it's going to take a couple months before.
Mayor Pro Tem Margot's making a good point. I don't know if you want to state it or.
typically, we determine residency based on where a homestead exemption is filed,
That's a good point, too.
so that you would be able to determine it without knocking on the doors.
Should that be something that's included in this?
It's already a law.
It's already a law. Okay.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's another way to verify.
Thank you.
Councilman Mitchell.
And Ms. Cook, the folks who are currently raising a petition from the Garden District, Pebble Creek and the other streets in there, they submitted their petition today, correct?
That's correct.
So this will not pertain to them.
That's correct, but I did encourage them to try to meet any requirements that were approved, but they did submit that earlier today. And of course, it would be wise to try to meet any criteria that's established.
And also, one thing I had brought up last time, with the fact that it's owner-occupied properties, that's the 30% and the 75%, is that correct?
The 30% is just, only for the 30% you have to reside on the properties. For the 75%, it can be all property owners.
So as it's written now, a developer can buy 5 of the lots, not live there, and still have a large say-so in how even though they are not, it's not owner-occupied.
For the 75%, correct, but not to be able to get the process started as part of the 30%. You would have to reside on the property.
That's troublesome to me. It really is, because I think that 75% is a high threshold to meet, and I'd spoken with some of the others. I'm more comfortable with like 60. I had expressed that last time, especially if it means that they don't have to be owner-occupied. I would like to see it owner-occupied, actually, because I think you have more investment in your neighborhood, and you have more investment in keeping it up, and like you moved into that neighborhood for a reason, because it looks a certain way and it feels a certain way, and it has trees and it has architecture that you like, and then all of a sudden you can get a developer that moves in and wants to change everything for all the folks who have been paying taxes on it. There's something about that doesn't ring fair to me.
Councilman Binder.
Last week, we brought up just kind of our evolution with the overlays, things that we've learned made city code entirely. So can you walk me through, so some of the biggest concerns during our first couple of overlays, or as developments were getting redeveloped, we saw stormwater and kind of a tree canopy over the, like, I'll call them main corridors of the neighborhood.
Right.
Being big concerns. Is there anything else that I'm missing besides I'm not including architecture?
Right. With the overlays that were passed last year, there was a lot of questions about how we determine height. So we actually changed our definition of how we determine height for a new building within the Unified Development Code. So that applies everywhere, not just within an overlay. With the overlay, there was a lot of concern about tree safe. And we met with the neighbors and walked the neighborhood, and we were trying to determine, is it trees along the front that you want to preserve, or is it trees at the back? And what we landed on is, trying to preserve the trees along the front, but also requiring a streetscape that throughout the development that will encourage, tree-covered streets, tree canopy along the streets. And we also picked out different types of trees that are more water-loving trees. It didn't make sense to build a new home and then put like a row of evergreens along the street. We wanted to make sure that we had consistency and had oaks that are spaced along the street. The other concern that we had at that time was regarding stormwater runoff. So we also have different regulations that were established for the overlay in order to protect against any kind of drainage impacts.
But established for citywide, so something that's not overlay or
We have
overlay that you approved?
We have some that were established citywide, but some specific just to that overlay. Although the height definition that was changed, that's throughout the city, but there are specific drainage requirements for the overlay that aren't required elsewhere. And that was because there's a lot of new systems that are being put underground, And part of the requirements is if you put the system underground, we want to have additional soils testing to make sure it is something that's going to work and perk. Plus, we put in requirements that you have to certify that it was put in correctly. So there's specific guidelines for these overlays.
So this is not exactly a simple one. I'm excited that you have a process in place. I think it's there. Me personally, as somebody that's not in an HOA, I don't want, my 50% of people telling me I'm living in an HOA now or having covenants similar. But, and then I think as a city, we've done a fantastic job with making sure we have infrastructure citywide and make the changes there like we saw in the stormwater measuring heights. I would like to know if any other cities have done something similar. I think the 75% can understand it not being owner occupied, but something to help prevent a poison pill. And I mean that as if there's one developer or one or two developers that own 25% of the property. They basically have a pocket veto on anything that might be good for the whole, but not good for the value of their property. And I don't know if that's adding, like making it 2/3 or saying, okay, if the 2/3 of the owners, override the veto of 25%. I don't know, but it is that, I guess, is 25% in what you've seen as developments taken over. Is that a number that we've seen where there's 25% of developed owned property, people looking to tear down and rebuild?
It's different for different neighborhoods. Of course, the overlays that we put together for Meadowbrook Hills, Milton Estates, and Stonegate Manor, they are seeing more activity in building than other areas.
But are they at that 25%? Is that a high water mark or a low water mark? And
Probably close
Okay.
to the 25%. And of course, if a builder builds a home, somebody's going to live there, so then it is part of that development that should have, maybe a say in the overlay if
Absolutely.
you're changing it to where you have different landscape requirements or maximum house sizes or where you can't build a flat roof and maybe they have an existing flat roof and they want, an accessory dwelling that may have a flat roof. So I'm sure that you will have people that live and buy in those houses that would like to be part of that overlay.
And part of that discussion last week, that's kind of evolved, where maybe it isn't a good idea where it's just owner occupied for that final approval because they do have equity stake in there. I just want to be able to protect that one person or one minority, one business entity is holding the veto power for everything, but I didn't know how realistic that is, or if that's something.
And it may be, if that's the will of council, you could reduce that percentage. I mean, that was the percentage we recommended because that's the percentage we use in other places within the Unified Development Code, like for establishing speed humps within a neighborhood.
I wouldn't mind seeing it at 2/3, just to see, and we can adjust as needed. But it's a good, you put together a good process. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and we thought it was important to have a process because the last time we didn't have a process, and it took about 8 months to go through that process. So we do want people, if, again, they want to come forward, this is not city initiated, it's all for property owners if they want to come forward with that process.
Okay.
Any other questions for Director Cook? I do have a couple. My understanding, I believe you had said prior to this, that the 75% was something you had taken from codes in DeKalb County?
No, that was from our code for the speed humps. Within the DeKalb County one that I looked at, it did have a 55% threshold.
55%? And that had been defended in court?
Not that I'm aware of, but when we looked at that and we tried to make a good recommendation, we didn't believe that 55% of a neighborhood should make that decision for an entire neighborhood, and just, I don't think that 55% was a good number. And so we tried to look at what has worked in Alpharetta for other criteria.
How long has it been established in DeKalb?
I don't have that answer.
Okay. I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you. Ms. Shapiro, do we have any public comment cards on this item?
We do have one, Mr. Mayor. The first and only one is for Michael Buchanan.
Okay.
Hello again. See y'all. Yeah, I have some questions and things about this. Listening to Ms. Cook and all made me also realize that as it stands now, 25.1% of the people that live in where I do get to kind of make the rules. And so that just seemed kind of a bit much. And also, I do know that people who don't live in Alpharetta don't get to vote on things in Alpharetta. So I think that's something to consider, unless we've changed that. So, but anyway, like we've all seen in the last few years, things are changing around here. And we're all fine with progress. We understand that. But as I've mentioned before, there are degrees of progress. And for sure, there's much to consider about everything that's happening here. All the wonderful new houses are all wonderful, and they all have their place. Some of them's place is just not here, I don't think. And the new overlay is addressing this, but I do have some questions. I read through the text from the agenda on February 27th, and I found some sentences that seem at odds with each other. One of them says, a 75% threshold of real property owners in support of the overlay. Then the next sentence says, this is to, the purpose is to establish a residential infill overlay district where there is support of a majority of property owners. That's the wording from the city, not us, right? You can't have it both ways. So I would support a majority. That's kind of the way things seem to work. And we're not asking to change anything of people that already live there. And it's just a simple, let's look at some of the architectural styles that are coming in, because some of them, they just, you know, maybe they need to be in Malibu instead of Alpharetta. So also, at the end of that same sentence, it talks about there's a layer of regulation to help combat incompatible development. So who decides that? What does that mean, incompatible development? I think we need to kind of...
Mr. Buchanan, I know you've spoken to us several times, so I'll just remind you that we generally try to keep it at 3 minutes.
Oh, I'm almost done. Okay, so my big question is, why is it incumbent of us to raise the issue? That evidently the city does understand this problem, because this is part of the proposal. And when we did the new other overlay district, overlay thing, then we didn't have to jump through all the hoops of percentages and petitions and everything. So I'm just kind of wondering why that's the case. So anyway, I appreciate everybody's attention and concern on this. I know I'm the one here, but I do represent a lot of people in the neighborhood that have some questions about all this. So more conversation is in the works, I hope. That's right. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else that would like to come forward at this time? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Do I have a motion from council?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, I offer a motion tonight to approve PH-23-02 Unified Development Code Text Amendment Procedures to establish a residential infill overlay district as presented this evening.
Second.
Have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Merkel, and a second by Councilman Dorito. That was to approve. Friendly amendment. Councilman Mitchell.
I'd like to make a friendly amendment that the 75% is changed to 60% and that it specifically state owner occupied.
Do you accept that?
Not from a legal standpoint. I can't.
Why?
Because
Well, this isn't a back and forth.
I understand. Yeah, I'm not accepting that. I can't accept that.
I'd like to, can I offer a friendly amendment?
Councilman Bynum?
I'd like to adjust it from 75% to 2/3 majority.
Is that friendly amendment?
Making it weaker, but sure. I'll accept that.
Yes,
Councilman Dorito?
I'll accept that.
So we have a motion and a second with a friendly amendment to approve it as staff recommended, changing the ratio to 2/3 of the property owners.
Yes, property owners.
Okay, we're all clear on the motion. Any discussion?
So that's property owners, not owner occupied.
Correct.
Okay. All right.
Councilman Binder.
When I first came in, I first understood last week for it to be owner occupied, but in the discussion of council, it made sense that the owners overall, whether they live there or not, have skin in the game. And so I do believe they should have it there, and I'm definitely not at the 50% because I don't want to have it become based on what my neighbors say for 50%. But again, I want to avoid any kind of where they're a little late to the game on having the overlay, and there's a lot more development there, and there's a poison pill aspect to it. So I think that 2/3 is nice down the middle, and I appreciate y'all going there with the friendly amendment.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, I've been working on this for a while. You know, the city's going out on a limb doing this, literally, because private landowners' rights have landowners' rights. We've had situations where established neighborhoods have tried to convert tennis courts to pickleball courts to get that shot down because the neighbors filed and said, look, when I moved in here, that wasn't a use. And they arbitrarily put it in, and now it's keeping me up at night. So we got to be careful what we do with existing neighborhoods. As Councilman Binder says, he doesn't want, he knew when he moved in his neighborhood it didn't have an HOA, which has its advantages and disadvantages. I'm in one right now where you can't paint your mailbox without permission, as many of you understand. So I hear what you're saying, Councilman, in regards to ownership. But again, I mean, as far as occupancy, as an owner, there's still an owner of the property of itself that has it. And I think if adjusting this down to 2/3 helps get it across the line, I think it's important. And I think it will offer the homeowners an opportunity to test the waters and see if that's something their neighborhood wants to do. So I commend the city for putting it together, and let's hope it works.
Councilman Mitchell.
This is better, but this is totally different than putting in a speed bump where you need 75% of the people. I live in a neighborhood that did that, went through that whole process because we had children in the neighborhood. Who's going to vote no on that? But my concern is that someone who lives in Douglasville and buys up 5 different properties in one neighborhood and wants to control it without even having any vested interest in it other than just buying them to resell them, it's a different character. And to me, Mike, you brought up a great point. That person can't vote in Alpharetta. They can't issue any vote or really their opinion isn't taken into consideration. But the point was given that if somebody buys a house, then they should be able to. Well, yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly because they've invested and they're invested in that neighborhood and you know. But either way, I'm not going to get it there on the owner occupied. But I am glad that you all are willing to go with the 2/3. That makes it better and it makes it more easily accomplished. Maybe, you know, this is a heavy hurdle for people to get to anyway, for a neighborhood to get to. But you got to talk to each other and you got to decide what you want as a neighborhood. So I can support that because of the 2/3.
Councilman Dorito.
Thank you, Mayor. Likewise, I agree the 2/3 is a great compromise. I think one of the things I just want to say to the public is, you know, the property rights of all individuals are important, both the minority interests and the majority interests. And so we have a tough job up here trying to balance that. We don't want to attract litigation to the city, be costly for the taxpayers, but at the same time, we also recognize that we have areas of the city that, you know, some folks are knowing there's some issues as far as new owners coming in and building mini mansions and impacting, you know, some of the things that we have been, you know, trying to keep up with as far as, you know, maintaining, you know, specimen trees and canopy trees and dealing with stormwater issues around the city. And so we've been dealing with these issues as a council since I've been up here pretty proactively. And so this particular ordinance for the overlay district criteria, I would have been fine. I'm going to be perfectly honest. I would have been fine with the 75% because I feel, you know, all owners, both minority and majority, have to be respected in the process, and it should be difficult to come in and have a part of our community come in and, you know, in effect impose, you know, restrictions around an area of the city. It should be difficult enough to build consensus and have all property owners come to some sort of positive consensus for everyone to be happy with. And I think, you know, the 2/3 is fine. I think it's close enough. I really think that there's other issues that we should consider to address some of the issues that are driving these types of overlays. And so we need to continue doing that. But at the same time, if this gives us some sort of ability to manage and have our community be happy to manage the area that they live in and keep some sense of character in their area of the city, by all means, I'm in support of that. And I think that this probably serves everybody well, both the majority owner's interests and the minority.
So I'll be honest, I'm not decided yet. That's why I was just going back and looking over this. I understand the people in this room want to do this. I'm grateful to staff for pulling this together. You know, when you administer those oaths at the beginning of this meeting and you talk about defending the Constitution of the United States of America and the Constitution of the state of Georgia, and it reminds me that everybody on this dais did the same thing. And I take those oaths very seriously. Not that we don't all, we all do. But what you're asking us to do, to me, is not a small task, because even at 75%, that means 1/4 of your neighbors are going to be impacted by something they may not support. And I think I was comfortable with the 75%, but I'm not sure that I am with 2/3. And it's not because y'all don't deserve to do what you want with your property, but I've got to reconcile with myself that I can dictate to your neighbors who may be counting on that investment, because what you're trying to do is make sure it's what you want to remain in your neighborhood. Some of the people in your neighborhoods are counting on that to pay for a nursing home when they can no longer live independently. I mean, those are huge investments to them, and I take that seriously. Okay, all those in favor of the motion to approve with staff's recommendations, changing the percent to 67%, please vote yes. Otherwise, vote accordingly. Was passed unanimously. That'll wrap up public hearing portion of tonight's meeting. We'll move on to new business. Pardon? So the first item under new business is the Rucker Road Park Design Conceptual Site Plan Approval. Director Rogers?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. I'm here tonight to ask for formal approval of the conceptual plan for the Rucker Road Park as prepared by Columbia Engineering. These plans were presented at workshops at both the Alpharetta Recreation Commission and Mayor and City Council. There are no questions or concerns raised at the Recreation Commission workshop or the City Council workshop. If approved tonight, staff will direct Columbia Engineering to create a set of engineered construction plans that will use to bid and complete construction for the project. I'm glad to answer any questions that you may have.
Have any questions for Director Rogers? Thank you, sir. Ms. Shapiro, do we have any public comment cards on that item?
We do not, Mr. Mayor.
However, if anyone's here that would like to speak on this matter, now's your chance. Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Do I have a motion from council?
Yes, sir. I move that we approve as presented the conceptual plan for Rucker Road Park designed by Columbia Engineering and Services Incorporated.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilman Binder, a second by Councilman Mitchell. Any discussion? Councilman Binder.
I'll keep it short, but I still get very excited about new parks and new times there. That park has been incredibly activated with very little resources. Thank you for y'all back there, and you know who I'm talking about. And I just feel it in my heart that every resident deserves a park, 10-minute walk, and safe way to get there, and that's why I was here about 8 years ago. So thank you for having this come into fruition, and thank you for all the other parks coming because of the bond. So good job, Parks team. And Pete, for sure, because I know you do a lot of the heavy lifting on the infrastructure and project management. So you deserve the praise too as well, my friend.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion to approve the Rucker Road Park design conceptual site plan approval? Vote yes, otherwise vote accordingly. And does pass unanimously. So that'll wrap up the new business portion of tonight's meeting. We'll move on to the workshop items. First workshop item is the Mayfield Grower Road Partnership, City of Alpharetta and City of Milton. Director Rogers.
Thank you. In April 2017, the City of Alpharetta and the City of Milton approved an MOU to jointly acquire, operate, improve, and maintain a municipal park located on Mayfield Road. The Alpharetta's portion of the money that was used to purchase this came from the 2016 Parks Bond. The 2017 Memorandum of Understanding also stated that the two cities would enter into a formal IGA for the future obligations such as daily and long-term decisions, maintenance, repair, upkeep, capital improvements, and programming. It is further stated that both cities should be guided by the principle that the park is jointly owned by Alpharetta and Milton and should be jointly used by both cities' citizens as a passive park. The staff in the two cities have been discussing the possibility of using a portion of the Mayfield property for expanding to the successful Grow Road program currently held at Old Rucker Farm. This program engages volunteers to grow produce that is given to the North Fulton Community Charities Organization for distribution among our most needed citizens. The Grow Road program produced and donated approximately 2,200 pounds of produce in 2022. Milton staff is giving a similar presentation to Milton City Council this evening. We are seeking direction for the staff to engage in establishing the details of the necessary IGA for the Grow Road to be considered at Mayfield Park. We have with us tonight Anita Upin, Economic Engagement Manager from the City of Milton. Welcome. In a combined effort, the staff of the two cities would draft a detailed IGA regarding the Grow Road program for formal presentation and approval by both city councils. This IGA would address cost, staff time, maintenance, security, and evaluation of the Grow Road program. Currently, we're gathering information on the cost of environmental remediation and the removal of the many homes and businesses, many homes and buildings on this property. I'll be glad to answer any questions that you may have about this workshop item.
Any questions from council? Director Rogers, the only question I have is, you know, we already have tremendous investments in the Old Rucker Road Farm program. And have you given any thought, has the Recreation Commission given any thought to how we're going to program this, and will there be any additional costs? Because I know you said volunteers, but Old Rucker Road started off as volunteers, and we've got several people that are on staff now attending that program. So I'm just curious.
Yeah, that would be, we're going to, if we move forward with this, then we would sit down with Milton and come up with the cost of the program, and that would be part of the presentation. We'd come back, here's the cost of going into the Grow Road program. We haven't gotten into that particular depth yet as far as the programming, because we didn't want to do that without the two councils knowing that we were going into that detail of programming. So it would come back to both groups, and in that would be not only the cost of the initial cost, but the ongoing maintenance cost would also be factored in that, and we'd bring that back to this group.
Okay. So, and for those that aren't aware, this is a workshop, so we're not voting on anything. We're not making any decisions. We have to have these discussions in public, and this is your opportunity to listen and join in if you have comments or anything like that before we start to make a decision. So I'll just note for the record that my concern is how much it's going to cost to run this program. There's value in it, but we're already investing a lot. And so I'm concerned that the costs could become more than the benefit if we're not very cautious in how we design those programs. And, you know, we're very fortunate to have a lot of our sports programs run by volunteers because it's a model that works in Alpharetta. People that care about their kids' sports or care about their own sports and activities tend to do a better job than just people who are paid to help coordinate those activities. And I would encourage us to work towards that model if at all possible.
Sir.
Any other questions or comments? Councilman Binder.
Just a comment, and it goes back to having an area, within a walking distance, and some of those areas. I can't remember if it was you or our friend previous director Perry that brought up Park Oasis, Park Deserts, where, and especially in those borderland areas where it's like, well, half of them would be served. I think this is great that we're doing it with the city of Milton. There's going to be costs into having those activations. I do agree 100%. We got to be accurate in what those cost estimations will be, but we are a great community that like nice things, and we see it when we're in downtown Alpharetta having all the concerts, and I think it's good to have something for all of Alpharetta. So, but we'd be interested to see what the costs are, and that we keep accurate on that. But I think all of Alpharetta deserves to have some nice things within a walking distance.
Any other feedback or questions? Mr. Lagerblum.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. One thing I would like to throw out there just to see how you react to it is it would be really nice to be able to report back to Milton that our position in Alpharetta is we'd like to see the houses and structures on the site go away as soon as possible. I think we're starting to create an attractive nuisance out there that we've now disconnected utilities and all of those structures. They are going to deteriorate in place if we don't help them along, and because we share this with Milton, I'd like to be able to say that my city council is encouraging that we move quickly on doing that. But if I wanted to throw that out there to see if you all are in fact encouraging of that so that I could report that back to Milton, regardless of whether or not Grow a Road moves forward. I think that parcel is a site that we own that we need to make it a little safer than it might be today.
Any responses from council?
Yeah.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I agree. You call it attractive nuisance, liability, and might even get Pete to pull some in-house guys to help speed that up. So I would be in favor.
Or some firefighters.
That's what firefighter training.
There you go. Y'all get creative, make it happen.
So, Mr. Lagerblum, I think that gives you enough direction to proceed on that. And Mr. Rogers, appreciate it. So that'll wrap up that workshop item. The next one is the text amendment to the Code of the City of Alpharetta, Georgia Alcohol Ordinance. Ms. Shapiro, you have this item.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. So tonight before you is a workshop to discuss our city's alcohol ordinance. So this is really just for discussion purposes between council and to also kind of give some staff some direction on this item. Our code enforcement manager, Brett Schroeder, who's also here this evening, we are often approached by business owners in the community that either have a current license and have questions about how they can use that to generate revenue in their business, or also with new businesses that are looking to open or will soon open in Alpharetta. So we kind of keep a list of just proposals or ideas that business owners have that are or are not currently addressed in our code, to just look and see kind of what the direction of council might be in that aspect. So we have 3 code sections that we wanted to discuss with you tonight. The first 2 really are stated within state law, and we'll get into those in just a second. And then the third one is dealing with package licensing at eating establishments. So I did provide some materials in your packet as well. The 2 state law sections, just for reference, are OCGA 3310 and 3311. What the state basically did during the pandemic and also during COVID is I think there was a lot of push from retail business owners. Yes, Councilman Bender.
I see that you're going off the presentation. Is there any way we can get that in sync with monitors?
And then it's on the 3rd page. You might need to re-download the packet. One moment. Yes. Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Drinkard. So back to the 2 code sections that are referenced in state law is OCGA 3310 and OCGA 3311. So these 2 code sections, they were House bills during COVID and were later officially codified in the state code. Both deal with delivery, the first section of alcohol that's purchased from a retail package store, and the second deals with picking up alcoholic beverages that have distilled spirits that are made on site at an eating establishment. So these 2 code sections, the state law allows restaurants and package stores to engage in those acts. However, it is up to the local jurisdiction whether or not they want to permit that. So with these 2 specific code sections, the city and city council could make a decision to say, we do not want that to occur within our city, and we could bring forward a future ordinance amendment to allow that.
That's currently allowed, though, by ordinance in the city, right?
So speaking to OCGA 3310, which would be, for an example, say that when I went home later, I wanted to purchase a bottle of wine from Total Wine. I didn't want to get out, and I could pull up my Uber app, order, or my Uber Eats app, and have a bottle of wine delivered straight to my house. So we did add that to the city code during COVID. However, we referenced it when it was in its House bill phase as a kind of emergency, or I don't want to say emergency, but a benefit to our business owners during COVID. So if it's something that we did want to continue to allow, I would recommend that we amend it to reference the actual state law that it's being cited to.
But it's currently codified as okay?
Essentially, yes.
Okay.
So this is something that is allowed by state law and that we mirrored our ordinance to make it completely clear to our business owners that we allow that here. So I think kind of for conversation purposes, we just kind of wanted to get your feedback to see kind of what the temperature of council was on keeping that and amending it to mirror the state law, or if that's something that we do not want to prohibit within the city.
So if I could follow up on that question, I'm just a little curious about the next section, the 3311,
Yes.
to sell mixed drinks made with distilled spirits to go orders. Now, I remember 10, 15 years ago going with a friend of mine from Louisiana, and they literally had drive-through daiquiri stations.
Yes.
Would that permit someone to, like, just grab a drink in a cup?
So the state law does have certain requirements of the type of container. It has to be in a tamper-evident container.
That answers my question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So no straw holes. And then we further also would likely propose, if this were to be approved and later amended by council or added in, that there be a eating requirement component of a to-go order, similar as if you were dining in the restaurant. We do have the 50-50 alcohol-food ratio, so we would require that no more than 2 mixed alcoholic beverages be purchased with a food item. So say, for example, you went to grab Mexican, I could order a quesadilla and 2 margaritas to go for myself and a taco and 2 margaritas for my husband. For my to-go order, I would drive to the store or to the restaurant, pick it up, go to my house and drink them. And that is currently allowed under state law. And City Attorney Tracy?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor and council, I do want to just to piggyback on what Ms. Shapiro is stating right now. All of those restrictions also appear in the state law regarding it being accompanying a food order, regarding that it there's a limit of two mixed drinks per entree ordered. So all of that is also spelled out in state law.
So you couldn't order a bucket of margaritas?
That is, my understanding that would be no. There's also within the state law, the term mixed drink is defined, that it contains no more than 3 ounces of distilled spirits and it's sealed in an approved container. So there are limits under state law as to quantity.
Councilman Binder?
I do believe we have maybe some public that's going to maybe speak or hear about it, but so just I want to wait till I hear public comment. But in regards to the first one, so that kind of bypasses, does it bypass our alcohol, giving an alcohol license to somebody like a liquor store? And so I guess what if the delivery system, what kind of certification are they going through so they make sure that they're carding the people and that they're not handing it off to a 16-year-old at the front door?
Yes, and I think that is contemplated in the state law as well. The method for which the Uber driver or third-party delivery service is required to check for identification upon delivery. There are some requirements there. I think if I'm not mistaken, I was doing a little bit of digging on this, and I believe Uber or a similar app requires the delivery person to either scan or take a photo of the person's driver's license at the time of delivery or have them sign for it perhaps.
And will that be a city requirement to look after or a state requirement for them? Who's looking after that? Who's overseeing that?
Are you talking about in terms of enforcement or?
Well, enforcement and making sure it happens. And the only analogy I have is Carvana sells cars online. They got in big trouble with their titles, you know. That's, I guess, well and good, not really for cars, but not good at all if they're not enforcing it and handing it off to 16-year-olds, and that becomes a bigger issue.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I want to be clear, because this is a workshop and we're here to, determine what the council would like us to do going forward in consultation with city staff, that in terms of these 2 state law provisions that we're talking about right now, the way that those were drafted and the way that they now appear in state law, this is the law of the land in Georgia unless a city specifically or local government specifically has a local ordinance that prohibits it.
Okay.
So, you know, what we're here talking about tonight, I know that there have been some drafts to put it in the local code. It would be redundant of state law at that point. And there are, you know, we can talk about the benefits or negatives of having redundancy between state law and the code. It would be, you know, my point of view that if the position is going to be that we're going to follow state law, that it not be in the code, we just leave it alone and let it be governed by state law.
So with that, so we're not asking to put this to approve it. We would prohibit it is what the action that we would have to take.
If that is
what you're
what
asking
the-
for these two.
Correct, and so of course, Ms. Shapiro is the one that has been working on this and is bringing this forward tonight, but we've been discussing it also. And so feedback tonight would be, this is what the law is, this is what state law says is allowed. And as of right now, other than, you know, you do have a provision in your local code that talks about the delivery service, because as Ms. Shapiro said, that was done during the pandemic.
Yeah.
You know, so, but what we're here tonight is to say, do you want us to explore an ordinance that would prohibit this, or are we just going to let state law stand?
So, no, I'll let up on my, for 3311, I'm good with the mechanics of it. I think that's one thing that we saw on it, the tamper-proof, so that nobody's having a roadie on the way home. I think that helps alleviate my fears, and I think it's good for our restaurants. 3310, I don't have a problem with the concept of it. I just would like to better understand the mechanics of it to make sure that somebody has the overseeing and the authority, because on that. But I think that makes sense too on delivery. So just want to know how it's
Councilman
working.
Dorito?
Ms. Tracy, just for clarification myself, under 3310 and 3311, we're not talking about packaged goods yet, right?
So
My understanding is under selling packaged goods from an establishment, not a regular, I guess, liquor store, whatever you want to call it. The city would have to codify that, correct? It's not like there's a state law that allows that and we just don't codify it locally. Doesn't the city have to take action to adopt that code in the city for packaged goods, or?
So I think, Councilman Dorito, what you're referring to is whether or not a facility who has a license for on-premises consumption can also sell packaged goods, packaged beer and wine.
So we're getting to that.
That is not a part of these.
I just want to make sure,
items.
we're talking about basically delivery of alcoholic beverages, which would be distilled beer, wine.
Right, so the 3310 state law provision allows me to pick up my phone and do an Instacart order from Total Wine and, you know, have it delivered to my house so that I don't have to, you know, go to the store.
And I think you made this clear, but I'm going to make it clear for the record. Today, Alpharetta has no redundant ordinance in place that reflects those two state code sections. We live by the code, like you said, it's the law of the land. We allow that in Alpharetta, but we don't need to do anything other than, if we don't want it to happen in Alpharetta, pass basically a code that basically says we're not allowing that in Alpharetta, correct?
For these two
For the liquor-
specific, yes, for
those
these
two sections.
specific items, except that y'all do have,
It's
Do you know what section
section
it is?
4-31. It's entitled Delivery.
so as it stands right now, 431 was repetitive of the House Bill 879. It was the 2020 bill, which said the city adopts and elects to incorporate certain provisions of House Bill 879. Specifically, a local city licensed packaged good retailers are permitted to deliver either themselves or through a qualified third party unbroken packaged alcohol. So I believe that would need to be repealed. And then you would just be governed by what is now codified in state law.
Any other questions or comments on this? Councilman Mitchell?
I have no problem with us allowing the state law to take effect here and repealing 4-31. I'd rather somebody, if they're at home drinking already, and they want to call the package store and have an Uber driver bring it to their home. I've got plenty of friends that would be an alcohol emergency, like you've referenced. So I'm not one of them, but
Those weren't
to
my
each his
words. I think
own.
those were yours.
Oh, okay. But I have no problem with this. I think it's safer than them drinking at home and then running out and going out and getting more. I'd rather have an Uber driver bring it to them. So, thank you.
Ms. Shapiro, would you like to continue?
So I believe we kind of have maybe a consensus on council here, so we have direction. Thank you. So the next item is similar in concept, but a little bit different, which deals with eating establishments and package sales. So as I mentioned earlier, during COVID, businesses were trying to come up with ways that they could take in more revenue, and some of the conversations that we've had with local business owners looking for other ways to expand their menu portfolio, and that deals with our package sales at eating establishments. And for the purposes of this conversation, I just want to make sure that we're not confusing what's considered a brew pub with an eating establishment. An eating establishment is generally a place where people would go to have dinner and maybe also order alcoholic beverages, whereas a brew pub is a similar concept where they can or can't have food, or they will have food options, but they generally are brewing some type of beer or beverage at the premises as well, in addition to allowing food, beverage, and to-go sales there. So an eating establishment currently, as it stands within our ordinance, say for example, an Outback, for example, you could go and have dinner there. If you had a bottle of wine that you really loved, you could buy a bottle of wine to go, take it home with you as a package sale. That eating establishment can sell up to 10% of their revenue with just a general on-premise consumption license. So for the purposes of this discussion, we just kind of wanted to ask council what their thoughts were, and also adding beer to that, whether it be just any manufacturer's craft beer, maybe a private label beer as a package option, in addition to eating establishments also being able to add wine, or currently sell 10%, up to 10% of wine as well.
Mayor Pro Tem Merkel.
Yeah, my question is I don't really care either way. Right now, if we're doing wine, I think it makes sense you could do beer, but I really don't want somebody coming in saying we're selling Jack Daniels out the door. But when it comes to pricing, so we were just down in the islands last weekend, and somebody said, hey, you can buy a six-pack at the gift shop and save money on buying it over the bar. Well, it's not true, because the six-pack was 6 times 5, which was the price at the bar. Can a restaurant establishment reduce the price or have a separate price per unit, whether it's wine or beer, going out the front door versus being served at the table?
I think that's a good question, one that we had not contemplated as part of this. I know that our code does, and Brett may be able to speak to this as well, but our code does talk about discounting prices of wine or alcoholic beverages in general. So he
Price to go versus price.
would that section also apply? Do you think in reference to
You can't
whether ordering a beer at the table versus ordering it to go, would they be required to have it be the same price?
The code talks that you can't reduce the price of alcohol more than 50%. Doesn't really specify in-house, out-of-house, because we currently don't have off-premise from a retail location.
And he's speaking to the promotion section in terms of offering promotions on alcoholic beverage sales.
Which we're not allowed to do.
More than 50%,
Right now, you can reduce happy hour 50% of drinks?
yes. You can't advertise it as happy hour. That's another code section that would do that, but you can reduce your up to 50%.
I don't know anybody reducing them 50%. Do you, Dave? No, I didn't think so. All right, just a question for,
Can I ask?
Councilman Dorito?
Ms. Tracy, under the current code, don't we allow brew pubs to distribute beer outside their premises?
I don't know what, do you mean sell packaged?
Yeah, where they
Yeah.
self-contain, oh,
Yes.
Yes.
Brew pubs and brewery.
so what if there's an establishment that brews their own beer, but it's not done on premises, but outside of the premises?
So the state law, Melissa, correct me here, but the state law is the one that drove the breweries and the brew pub, and I believe it says it has to be brewed on site to be delivered or to be sold as packaged from that site. So take Jekyll, for example. They don't brew, I don't know, one of their beers out here. They only brew a few out here. They can't distribute one that they brew on Marconi out of this store.
And
That
that's-
has to go through the three-tier system. What they, in the state of Georgia, what they brew out front doesn't, goes through that. Can go out that door.
And does anyone know why the state code is allowing beer distribution from a brew pub that is self-contained, made within the premises itself?
I think it started.
What's the
because
logic behind that?
I think it was the craft brew logic. Everybody started to get into the craft brew, and so it was very small, very contained, very. It's when the growlers kind of came about. They had a few places that you could go and pick up a growler, and it was very specialized beer. That they only made a limited amount of, and I think that's what they tried to do.
Is it more to, again, you may not answer
If I
this,
could
but
help a little bit,
I was just gonna,
I know, but if I could help a little bit, it's because alcohol distributors and car dealerships have great lobbyists.
Yeah.
well, I was gonna say, I mean, the reason why the state code might be that way, I don't know. I don't know what the legislative intent was when they passed it, but it's probably because they don't want brew pubs to support the craft industry, which is blown up in the country, right, and around the world.
Yeah, there was a.
And they probably don't want to give a loophole in it where they can bring in any beer from anywhere to, but the question I have is, what if they're brewing it outside but bringing it, distributing it through an establishment here in Alpharetta? That was, and it sounds like.
And I just a comment on your question about the breweries. I think when this was all being passed too, the brewery concept and them being able to sell straight out of the brewery was also a position to support small breweries to help them be able to monetize on their business and to really support Georgia local grown, homegrown breweries to kind of get them more publicity and fame, I guess,
It was
in a
very
sense.
controversial.
And also the state license fees for breweries are as a pack, because essentially a brewery also has a package component as well. Their fees are much lower than, say, if I was a retail package store that sold beer and wine. So they kind of gave some advantages to breweries as well in that sense.
So if the city wanted to amend our liquor ordinance to allow beer distribution, that state law would not usurp that, correct? I mean, if we wanted to just say in general, establishments similar to what we do with wine today can sell packaged beer out of their location and maybe have, the 10% rule similar to wine and the 50-50 food and, all those requirements that we have. Is there anything stopping us from doing that?
Not in state law.
Well, and I just want to be sure that I understand your question, Councilman Dorito, regarding distributing. You're just talking about selling packaged beer.
Packaged beer, yes.
Not,
packaged.
because I mean, that, there is a difference between the term distributor in terms of
No, yeah, I'm
looking
sorry
at,
for using
at
that.
alcohol, at alcohol law generally. But I think that, you know, the workshop item tonight on this code section 449 is to address that. It is, in not taking the brew pub concept out of it, because this doesn't apply to brew pubs. This applies to eating establishments with a consumption on the premises license. Can they also then hold a license to sell packaged beer and wine?
What I'll say, and I'll be quiet at this, let other colleagues speak if they want. I mean, we allow wine right now, liquor by the glass, brew pub contained beer distribution, beer, whatever you want to call it, sales, package sales. I don't have a problem with just everyone being able to sell packaged beer if we're, you know, allowing it for brew pubs under the state law, and then we're also allowing it for wine and liquor by the glass, you know, 2 per meal or whatever the requirement is. But we do want to make sure that these licenses are separate and distinct so that the city can track who's doing it, who's selling packaged goods, and have some control over it. As Councilman Binder talked about, if Uber's picking up this stuff, make sure there's a license requirement of who's picking up, that they're over 21 to be able to even pick it up and deliver it to whomever. I don't really see the downside to it in post-pandemic era. I mean, just like businesses and remote working environments, this is going to change all over the country, and you know, we're just really at the precipice of trying to manage this in a responsible way, and that's the key, doing this responsibly, so that we're not just basically having, you know, any type of alcohol being, you know, haphazardly, you know, packaged and sold throughout the city with no requirements and licensing features. So that's my point of view, anyway.
So just real quick, I'm fine with it. I don't really see the difference between going into Publix or QT or taking a 6-pack out of a restaurant as far as I'm concerned. So it's a workshop, no voting.
I'm also fine with it.
So I don't see anybody objecting to that one either, Ms. Shapiro.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for your input. I really appreciate it. In addition to that, the last item is section 4-137, and I think we kind of have direction now to kind of move forward with an amendment to 449, which would also trigger a need to amend section 4-137, which just basically defines retail establishments and would add eating establishment to allow packaged beer and wine. Are there any questions from council on this cleanup as well?
Any questions or concerns on this item? Councilman Dorito?
One point on selling packaged beer goods, if that's what we end up supporting and approving. Should we have, like, similar to, you know, liquor by the glass being delivered via Uber or whatever, should we have limits on how many beers someone could purchase out of an establishment? I would actually have you consider that.
Yeah, that's a good point. And a food
Or
item or
maybe a time in the evening where package.
So Councilman, if I may, on that point about the time restrictions, I believe that the state has some regulations regarding where packaged wine and beer is being sold at an establishment, a food establishment like this, has to follow the same time restrictions that other package stores have to follow.
Yes.
This may, well, I throw it out as consideration by the council, whether or not we want to put additional time restrictions on the time in the evening where you could actually sell out of premises packaged goods. If you want to go in and pick it up and walk out with it, I'm assuming you're going to be allowed to do that as well, right? So, for example, if an establishment is closing at 2 o'clock in the morning, do we want last call everyone buying a you know, a number of.
You would not be able to buy packaged, I'd have to look at the rules, but I believe it's midnight is when package sales have to terminate. So,
It's already in the state code.
well, I think it's it's either state or in the city code regarding package. I would have to look.
Okay.
I think it's state.
Well, that addresses my question, so thank you.
Any other, Councilman Binder?
Just, yeah, be clear, anything where we can take ordinance off our books and just use state, I'm fine with it. But kind of similar to the questions we had about the parks and resources needed to have the park. So if we're increasing this scope, Mr. Schroeder, how would that work for your staff? Because I do believe it's code enforcement that works for the enforcement of this code as opposed to public safety, correct?
Well,
Help me out, yeah, help me out here.
so it's kind of it's a two-parter. So Kathy's Department in Community Development is charged with evaluating applications for new establishments, ensuring that currently licensed establishments have appropriate licensing, pouring permits, et cetera. However, public safety is charged with ensuring that all establishments have appropriate pouring permits for all of their employees. And then public safety would also be overseeing any of the
Selling outside of times or?
selling outside of times, public
over-serving.
drunkenness,
Yep, okay.
over-serving.
So,
Say, for example, someone did have a mixed drink in their car and they were
no, yeah,
pulled
the
over.
traffic stops. Yeah, I didn't think Brett was gonna be doing traffic, but, so, just so I don't want you to answer now, but since this is a workshop, I would like to just know a statement from community development, code enforcement, and public safety, just how this would work on a resource, that they're good with their current resources, that kind of need, so, but.
Fortunately, we've got Director Robinson here, and we might as well give him a reason to come explain the enforcement.
I try to get you in for not the workshop, sir.
I think though on the licensing side and the holding the business as well as the person that's made the wrong decision, we've obviously, Director Robinson's team has that under control with state law and things, but there's not maybe a great way to hold the business responsible, and I think tying that together would make it even better for both of us.
Yeah, I don't have a great response because this is kind of uncharted territory, so we would have to definitely sit down and kind of figure out what this would look like. There would be some challenges, potentially, but I don't know how much, honestly, but it would certainly, we would have to utilize our resources more, and would create some challenges for us. And then there are the issues like traffic stops, things like that, differentiating, because as of now, you should not have alcohol in your vehicle when you get pulled over, but, if this is a situation like this, then obviously there are caveats where that would be permitted, and so we would have to work through those dynamics and how that would play out.
I think if that just can be part of the case, if you bring it forward past this workshop of what their answer would be on resources and how that would work.
One quick question for one of you. I imagine it's Brett or for Lauren, but so if you sell package out of a restaurant, does that count towards your ratio of food to alcohol?
So currently, it does not, and that is something that Brett and I have discussed, that we need to take a look at our monthly compliance forms that our alcohol license establishments submit monthly to kind of differentiate what those numbers look like. And if this is something that does get approved by council, I think it's something that we definitely want to see. I know we had a conversation with a potential retailer earlier this week that said, when you're selling bottles of wine at a restaurant versus selling it from Publix, there's usually a much higher cost associated with a bottle of wine from a restaurant than at a grocery store. So sometimes it's not always the cost of the bottle or the revenue that's generated. It might be some other metric that we need to look at in terms of volume.
And I'm sure it wouldn't be any of our restaurants in Alpharetta, but
Expensive wine.
history tells me that people try to push the envelope. So might want to anticipate, what if people were selling a six-pack as a to-go, but allowing them to drink it on-prem?
And I think that goes into the serving aspect, because Brett and I have talked about this before, and that servers, I believe, as part of their training, are required to either open the beer at the time it's being served or providing the beverage to them already opened at the time of giving it to a patron who's dining in the restaurant versus someone who's taking it to go. And that could be something that we add into our requirements for employees. We could also add something in there in the employee section for that too. But those are all good points.
Any other questions or comments? Councilman Mitchell.
I've recently heard about a particular restaurant who's ringing alcohol up as mac and cheese or some other dining item. And so, to me, a component of that, I don't see where it's going to be because if it's a closed container, you know, it's no different than them going to Publix and taking it home. But there may be some component of where you want to check their receipt if they get pulled over or whatever to make sure that the restaurant's in compliance with, you know,
Well, that would
our
probably be a
code.
challenge. That's
It would
something
be.
we typically do right now, and so, yeah, that would be, the officer would not know the ratios, and you know, that would be a challenge.
I understand. Yeah.
Yes.
That's why I had assumed that you all had already met and talked about this. I think before we have another meeting on it, it would be good for you all to get together and see if you have any proposals for us. Thank you.
Any other comments or input? Thank you, gentlemen and ladies. So that'll wrap up the workshop on the alcohol ordinance and close our workshop items. Now is your opportunity for public comment. If there's anyone here that would like to come forward and speak, now is your chance to do so. Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Reports. Do we have any reports this evening? Mr. Lagerblum.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one tonight, really a follow-up report to the report that we made at the last meeting, and this is going to be a pretty consistent report until we make a decision. And this is on our discussion that we'll have during workshop at the next meeting on the 20th regarding local elections. Since we last met, just to bring you all up to speed, we know that we saw the proposal that the City of Milton had put out and some of the numbers behind their information. If you followed along at all with Johns Creek's workshop of last week, you will have seen that Johns Creek put together a proposal that basically kept the same level of service. And what I mean by that is their staff was given direction that they needed to have the same number of polling places or more, the same number of locations, et cetera. And I think I can say, because it was done in a public meeting, that when they saw the cost of that versus the cost of Fulton County, I think Johns Creek has officially now made the decision to not hold their own election in 2023, but to continue in 2025. I don't say that because I'm trying to impact what we do here in Alpharetta. I say that just because it would be helpful. You don't have to answer tonight because this isn't published as a workshop, but if you just think about it and respond to me in pretty short order, the difference between those two wildly different numbers is the number of polling locations, because Milton premised theirs on the fact that they would do 1 or 2. Johns Creek is up somewhere pushing 18, and so when you push that number of polling locations, you're obviously going to have a different outcome because you have different quantity of poll workers that have to be hired, different equipment that needs to be procured, et cetera. Here's my question to you. Today we have 13 polling locations in the city of Alpharetta. In order to do the local elections and to give you a good idea as to what that cost is going to be, which is the answer I gave at the last meeting that we were putting together, it would be helpful to get a sense from you all what your expectation is from a policy perspective on convenience for the electorate in Alpharetta. And we can put together some idea of what 1 or 2 polling places look like, one on the east side, one on the west side. And we can also be very successful putting together through a budgeting exercise what it would look like to have all 13 or some lesser number than that, but more than 1 but less than 13. I really, in order to give you a good presentation on the 20th, I need to put, other than putting together an assortment of options and saying, here, we got to now pick. If you are passionate one way or the other on more, we'll call it what we call it the Milton model or the Johns Creek model, the very limited number of polling places versus exactly what they had when Fulton County is doing the elections. I could benefit from that feedback in the next week or so prior to us putting together the proposal, the presentation for March 20th.
Any thoughts, Councilman Binder?
I definitely don't want to give you thoughts right now to think about it, but I think maybe what would be good is to say, here's the model that our voters currently have and expect, you know, with the precincts, and here's what you would think would be justifiably reasonable as far as reducing the amount of polling locations. And that's probably, that would be a good decision, making my decision there. But I think our voters would like to know, how much does it cost to keep it the way we expect, the same level of service, and here's a more reasonable one. My other question is what date are we looking at as far as, I know we have the workshop on the 20th or so, but when you're going to look for a decision from us during one of our regular scheduled?
I've got to have that decision on the 27th because we have to report it back by the 31st. So this has to fall with the workshop on the 20th where there's some direction provided so I know what to bring back on the 27th, either to bring back the IGA and say we're going to continue to study it until the next election and move forward with Fulton County in 23, or if the direction is we're a go, then we will be a go from that moment, and I'll know what to notify Fulton County of.
So I think it would be good, hopefully, with our newspaper of putting, this is the timeline of our decision making, but then also on our social media of this is, that would be great. And I think you guys have done a good job with the transparency and our direction, but we just need to.
The good news is what I can bring back to you is largely scalable because there's a certain set of fixed costs that go along with an election like this, and then we almost just take number of polling places times X because it's shaking out as though each location would have the same level of service, and with the same level of service, it comes with the same anticipated cost. So let us put together, if you have direct feedback that you want to give me individually, then give me a call in the next couple of days, but I've gotten even some good direction so far tonight.
So I'll just give you my impression. One, I think one of my frustrations with Fulton County is they have so many different geographic locations, but only one location for early voting. So one of the reasons I'm confident that if we take on this task, that we'll do a better job is I think it would be more important to have better locations for early voting, perhaps, and because it's a lower turnout for a municipal election than you would have in a presidential or a senatorial race or something like that. And they only had one early voting for these huge turnout races that were statewide. And then there was nobody on our 19 different precincts, the 13 different locations. And so it seems to me anybody that was trying to do something efficiently would have had at least 2 or 3 early voting locations, and then you wouldn't have needed so many that shut down all our schools, which is also input I'll share with you publicly, is I think if we can avoid having to shut down Fulton County schools, they would welcome us allowing us to do that in other locations, whether it's our community centers or public buildings or some churches or something like that, that aren't disrupted every time we have a municipal election.
Thank you. We'll be back on the 20th with that published agenda item.
Thanks, sir. So that'll wrap up reports, I believe. And I am told we need an executive session, so I'll call for a motion and vote to recess into executive session.
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
I have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem, second by Councilman Mitchell. And that will be to recess into executive session. All those in favor, please vote yes or vote no. And it does pass unanimously. So we'll be taking a brief recess and returns in a little while.
can, yes, ma'am.
All right, we need a motion to reconvene the meeting. So moved. Motion by Mayor Pro Tem, second by Mitchell. All those in favor of reconvening, raise your right hand. Or we've got to vote? Okay, we'll vote. Vote yes or no. Just for that one. We have reconvened. This meeting is called to order, and I'll call for a motion
So moved.
to adjourn.
Second.
Motion by Dorito, second by Mayor Pro Tem. All those in favor of adjourning the meeting, yes.
Yes.
When are we out of this? When are we out of here for the feedback of the technology?